Not long ago, going electric on the water meant paying more for less. Less power, less range, and a motor you treated like a fragile experiment. Mercury leaned into that first wave, betting that an early start would lock in the future. Then, Yamaha rolled out a different answer, a $6,000 electric outboard with enough muscle to live where small gasoline engines used to feel untouchable. There is no ignition bark, no idle chatter, no smell of gasoline. Only silent acceleration across flat water behind a compact gray motor with a $6,000 tag, while Mercury's electric stand on the opposite pier waits under dim lights. But that silent push off the dock did not happen overnight. Yamaha had been preparing for this moment long before anyone noticed. But how did Yamaha pull this off? And what happens next for everyone else? The quiet race. When Mercury introduced its first serious electric outboards, the pitch was simple and comforting, electric power, but from a name everyone already trusted. A removable battery you could carry like luggage, a clean digital display, enough thrust to match a small 3.5 horsepower gasoline outboard on the right hull. It was not meant to change boating overnight. It was meant to make electric feel normal. Dealers embraced it faster than anyone predicted. Technicians who had spent decades diagnosing carburetor issues and fuel contamination suddenly found themselves learning voltage curves and battery management. Showrooms shifted, carving out tidy corners filled with compact electric motors and neatly stacked battery modules. And for early adopters, the appeal was real. No gasoline cans sloshing in the bilge. No oil film on the water after tilting the motor up. Quieter rides where you could hear conversation instead of vibration. For tenders, dinghies, and lake boats, Mercury's electric line felt like the safe choice. Familiar brand, modern twist. But inside that comfort lived limits everyone sensed. Power topped out early. Range looked fine on paper, but shrank quickly in wind, tide, or against a loaded hull. Buyers who wanted more freedom had to stack extra batteries, and the price climbed fast. Still, with Yamaha, Suzuki Motor Corporation, and Honda Motor Company dabbling only in trolling motors and small experiments, Mercury quietly became the default big brand electric option. It looked like a lead no one could catch. Yamaha, however, was watching from a different angle. Its move into electric did not begin with a portable outboard. It started with something subtle, an electric steering and propulsion system for small cruise boats on quiet lakes and resort canals. The specifications sounded modest, a few kilowatts of power, roughly equal to a 9.9 horsepower gasoline outboard. But the experience was unlike anything most people had seen. A compact enclosed electric unit spun silently underwater, and in twin setups, the boat could slide sideways into a slip, or pivot, almost, in place, with an eerie precision. Tourists thought it was magic. Yamaha engineers treated it as field testing. Then came the slow, deliberate expansion. More electric trolling motors, more auxiliary drives, more work on seals, housings, cooling paths, and control software. No bold promises, no dramatic unveilings. Just years of gathering data on what survived salt, sun, neglect, and time. While Mercury rushed to stake its claim, Yamaha walked the shoreline, taking notes. They saw connectors corrode, systems fail in damp compartments, batteries drain too quickly when owners pushed harder than planned. They also watched costs fall, marinas upgrade their power infrastructure, and regulators begin whispering about noise and emissions limits. So by the time Mercury's electrics became familiar fixtures at boat shows, Yamaha was no longer wondering whether it would join the mainstream electric outboard market. It was deciding how disruptive it wanted to be when it finally stepped onto the stage. The day the $6,000 package appeared. When that moment came, it did not arrive with fireworks. It showed up as a gray outboard on a test stand, a neat column of battery packs beside it, and a printed card held in a plastic frame. No wild shapes, no neon colors, no concept tag. It looked deliberately like just another Yamaha motor. The difference was in the numbers on that card. Beside a list of thrust and voltage sat a line that said, very simply, that a typical package with motor, control, and a real-world battery setup would land around 6,000 United States dollars, depending on dealer rigging and local taxes. For years, electric outboards had carried a quiet price penalty. Buyers expected to pay noticeably more than an equivalent small gasoline engine, especially once proper battery capacity was included. That higher sticker was easy to justify for people who wanted silence and clean operation more than they wanted range. Yamaha's card did something else. It set the total package price within sight of what many buyers were already spending on small 8 to 15 horsepower gasoline outboards, once rigging, fuel tanks, and first season service were added. It did not pretend electric had no costs. It simply refused to place electric in an entirely different economic world. A few feet away, Mercury's electric motors sat exactly where they always had. For light boats and short runs, their price-to-performance balance still made sense. But as soon as Yamaha hung a more powerful electric outboard in the same air, with a total system price that overlapped what a higher capacity Mercury electric setup would cost, the mental math changed. People on the dock did what people always do when something feels off. They pulled out their phones, they took pictures of both boards, they asked sales reps uncomfortable questions. If I am already spending this much money to go electric, why would I not choose the motor that can actually replace my small gas engine instead of just replacing my dinghy motor? Nobody answered those questions on a microphone. The answers were written in the way lines formed at the demo tables. On the water, where claims live or die. Demonstrations on carpet and conversations over brochures can only go so far. Sooner or later, a boat has to leave the slip. One hull, 2 motors, same route. First, the Mercury Electric, on a light hull, with a couple of people on board. The little motor showed exactly what had sold early adopters. Smooth, pull away from the dock, no cough of smoke, a gentler sound than a comparable gasoline portable, somewhere between a sewing machine and a distant fan. Enough push for harbor work, protected lakes, and all the short hops that had defined its first few years on the market. Later, the same boat came back with Yamaha's new electric on the bracket. The difference was not subtle. When the throttle eased forward, torque arrived immediately. The stern dug in, and the hull rose onto a more confident attitude. Where the smaller electric felt like a careful glide, the Yamaha felt like a firm handshake. The extra thrust was not about raw speed, it was about control. Around docks, the boat answered tiny lever movements without hesitation. Out in open water, small changes in throttle translated into crisp changes in pace. The sound was, if anything, even stranger than the first demo. Conversations from the bow drifted back clearly. There was no need to lean in or raise voices. Someone on the pier with a basic sound meter saw readings that sat comfortably in the range of normal human chatter, far below what a traditional small gasoline outboard would have produced at similar thrust. The scene did not feel like a science fiction set. It felt normal in a way that made the old gas soundtrack seem suddenly outdated. By the end of the afternoon, the pattern on the dock was hard to ignore. People who had arrived curious about electric in general were now curious about one electric option in particular. They had felt the difference through the steering wheel, not through a marketing graphic. And once they learned that the all-in cost of Yamaha's package was not living on a different planet from the more modest Mercury setups they had just been quoting, their internal questions shifted. Instead of, should I go electric, they found themselves quietly asking something sharper. If this is where electric already is, what will it look like in a few more seasons? And which brand do I want to be tied to when that happens? Tell me in the comments if you think this shift is real in your area, or if you believe it is still too early to call. And if this video is giving you the context most manufacturers never explain, go ahead and tap like. Make sure you subscribe too. The next developments will shape the entire small engine market when the price tag starts to cut deep. On the surface, the gap between Mercury's electric lineup and Yamaha's new 6000 United States dollar package looks like a simple difference in power and purpose. Mercury's electric motors sit comfortably at the lighter end of the scale, perfect for dinghies, tenders, and small lake boats, where silence matters more than muscle. Yamaha, meanwhile, stepped into the zone long dominated by small gasoline engines, the ones that tow a tube, push a loaded skiff, and claw their way back to the dock when the wind turns ugly. But inside the offices, behind the showroom floor where whiteboards are covered in projected margins, seasonal targets, and the quiet math that decides who stays in business, this simple gap lands with far more weight. Mercury's early strategy made perfect sense. Start small, prove reliability, ease customers into the idea of electric as an accessory, not a replacement. Dealers built their whole pitch around that logic. They stocked the early models. They trained technicians. They told customers, honestly, that Mercury Electric was ideal for light duty, but not yet meant to replace the family's small four-stroke. Then, Yamaha stepped directly into the gap between novelty electric and true gas replacement, and placed a $6,000 United States dollar price card on it. That number did something Mercury did not expect. It collapsed the distance between categories. Suddenly, a customer sitting at a sales desk sees three choices that are not separated by philosophy or purpose, but by a few manageable dollars on a financing sheet. A traditional gasoline outboard with all the future fuel and service costs that come with it. A lower-priced Mercury electric that is clean, quiet, and modest. A slightly more expensive Yamaha electric that promises to do nearly everything the old gas motor did, only without the noise, maintenance, or seasonal headaches. Spread the difference over a 5-year loan, and the jump from Mercury's electric to Yamaha's version stops feeling like an upgrade and starts feeling like a smart stretch. For buyers already leaning toward electric for environmental reasons, comfort, or simply curiosity, that stretch becomes a small leap. Mercury's dealers feel that leap as a loss. Discounts start appearing earlier in conversations. Package deals show up where they never used to. Motors that felt confidently priced last year are now sitting next to a competitor that offers more punch for nearly the same monthly cost. It is not that Mercury's electric line suddenly stopped making sense. It is that the comfortable space above it, the space Mercury expected to fill with future, higher power electric models, has been occupied before those models even arrived. On a spreadsheet, this is just a shift in market segments. On a sales floor, it is every hesitant customer who says, "Let me think about it," stands up, and drifts quietly toward Yamaha's corner of the showroom. And for dealers who built their strategy around being the first brand in the electric lane, that quiet drift is the sound of a lead slipping away. Dealers, service bays, and a business model under pressure. Behind every engine on a crate, there is a quieter balance sheet. For more than a century, the marine service economy has been built around internal combustion. The real profit at many dealerships does not come from the day you shake hands on a new outboard. It comes from the next 10 years of oil changes, tune-ups, winterization, and mid-season rescues. A small gasoline outboard is a reliable machine, but it is also a collection of parts that wear, gum, crack, or corrode. Shops stock carburetor kits and filters. They book out weeks ahead each spring. In cold regions, they run winter storage and shrink wrapping operations that keep lights on when docks are frozen. Electric outboards live by a different rhythm. No crankcase oil to drain. No spark plugs to replace. No fuel lines to varnish from old gas. The main scheduled work becomes software updates, bearing checks, seal inspections, and the occasional cooling system flush. There is still money to be made in installation, upgrades, and troubleshooting, but the easy repeat jobs that once filled calendars begin to thin out. Multiply that change by every $6,000 United States dollar electric package that leaves the showroom, and the impact on a dealer's long-term income becomes hard to ignore. Some businesses adapt aggressively. They invest in high-voltage safety training, battery diagnostic gear, and new kinds of service packages built around inspections and reliability guarantees. They look at hull work, electronics, and storage as places to recover revenue lost to disappearing oil changes. Others hesitate. It is easy to keep telling yourself that electric will remain a niche for a while longer, that most customers will stick with what they know. That might even be true in certain regions for a time. But each season that Yamaha and Mercury add more electric models with more power at more approachable price points, the window for a slow, comfortable transition shrinks. For a buyer standing in front of the $6,000 United States dollar Yamaha package, those internal struggles are invisible. All they see is a quieter boat and fewer future bills. For the dealer writing up the paperwork, the pen feels a little heavier than it did when every outboard sale came with an unspoken promise of years of service work to follow. Batteries, ethics, and the part nobody likes to talk about. In the glossy version of this story, the only thing that changes when you bolt an electric outboard onto a transom is everything within sight of the dock. Clean water, no exhaust, a horizon that smells like salt, and sun instead of burnt oil. It is a compelling picture, and on a local level, it is true. Replacing a gasoline motor with an electric one removes noise and emissions from the places where people swim, fish, and breathe. The part that is harder to fit into a brochure lies much further away. Electric outboards live and die by their batteries. Most of those batteries today are built around lithium, often mixed with other elements like cobalt, nickel, or iron in different chemistries. Digging those materials out of the ground, refining them, and shipping them to factories is messy, energy-intensive work. In salt flats and high deserts, lithium extraction draws down precious water. In some mining regions, cobalt has been linked to dangerous working conditions and children in tunnels that no safety inspector would ever approve. Newer chemistries and better oversight are improving that picture in some places, but the story is far from clean. Yamaha's $6,000 United States dollar package does not erase that upstream cost. Mercury's electric line does not either. Neither do the boutique brands that built the electric outboard category long before the giants joined. All of them are working inside a system where the environmental burden shifts from the end of the tailpipe to the beginning of the supply chain. At the same time, there is another layer that seldom gets much airtime. What happens when these batteries reach the end of their useful lives on boats? Recycling programs exist, but they are patchy. Regulations are evolving. In practice, a lot of packs will likely be repurposed into stationary storage or slowly fed into new recovery systems over time. But the route between a quiet harbor and a responsible recycling facility is not always straight. For a boater trying to decide between a gasoline outboard, a modest Mercury electric, and a more powerful Yamaha electric, none of these questions have tidy answers. What you can say, without much doubt, is that running electric at the point of use improves the air and water immediately around your boat. Beyond that, the ethics get foggy. Some buyers will accept that tension as part of a larger transition away from fossil fuels. Others will hold off until they see clearer proof that the whole chain, from mine to marina and back again, is being handled in a way they can support. That unresolved tension sits in the background of every quiet test ride. What this means for your next boat, all of this becomes very simple when you strip the story back down to a single decision. You have a small boat, you need a motor, you have 3 paths. The first path is the one everyone has walked for decades. You buy a small 4-stroke gasoline outboard from Yamaha, Mercury, or another familiar name. It starts every spring with a bit of care. It drinks fuel without complaint. It makes itself heard over the water. You know exactly what you are getting and roughly what it will cost you each season. The second path keeps you in Mercury's electric world. You accept the limits of lower power and shorter range because your use case fits inside them. You run a tender, a lake skiff, or a slow inshore boat that never strays far from home. You can live with that, and the idea of quiet, low-maintenance propulsion appeals more than raw muscle. The third path is the one Yamaha just drew a thick line under with its $6,000 United States dollar package. You decide that if you are going electric, you want something that can stand in for your small gas engine, not just your dinghy motor. You expect enough thrust to push your loaded boat without feeling fragile. You expect a range that matches your real day on the water, not just the most optimistic number on a spec sheet. And you expect the price to live in the same world as the engines you are used to buying, not in some rarefied space reserved for people who write checks without reading them. If that is the path you are considering, a few questions matter more than the logo on the cowl. How far do you actually run on an average trip, and at what speeds? Where will you charge between outings, and how patient are you willing to be about charge times? Is there a dealer within reach who understands these systems well enough to support you over the long haul? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, how much is the sound and smell of gasoline really worth to you when an alternative is sitting on a stand a few feet away, asking you to imagine a different kind of day on the water? The $6,000 United States dollar Yamaha electric outboard does not answer those questions for you. It just makes them impossible to ignore. A short look ahead. A single new motor at a single boat show does not rewrite a century of boating overnight. Mercury's electric outboards are not going away. Yamaha's first mainstream electric will not be its last. Other brands will keep pushing power higher, prices lower, and ranges longer. Somewhere in that push and pull, the familiar growl of small gasoline engines will start to feel, slowly and then suddenly, like something from another era. What Yamaha just did with a $6,000 United States dollar package is mark a line on the calendar that the industry will remember later. The day a big legacy brand stopped treating electric as a side project and stepped directly into the part of the market that used to belong entirely to small gas motors. From here, the real questions begin. How fast do regulators tighten noise and emissions rules now that usable electric options exist? How do dealers survive when a growing share of their customers no longer need them every spring? What happens to the value of your trusty gasoline outboard when the next generation of electric hits the racks with even better numbers? Those answers are not here yet. They are coming. Spend enough time at the docks in the seasons ahead, and you will hear the future arriving. Quietly boats, leaving the pier with only the sound of water parting beneath the bow. If you have thoughts on where this shift leads, drop them in the comments. Your perspective might help another boater make sense of it. And if this kind of long-form dive brings clarity, hit like so I know to keep going. Be sure to subscribe too. What happens next in this electric race is already taking shape.